Well, what an important weekend this is. 52 years ago, we lost Dr. King to the forces of hatred. We lost his physical presence, but we did not lose his message, his work. And it's essential for us to continue to lift up his voice, remembering as we do that even this great man stood on the shoulders of organizers like Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Joanne Robinson, who was the driving force behind the bus boycotts. Brave people whom King really only represented in a way. He was the perfect mouthpiece for the movement, but in a sense he was just a mouthpiece. King's well-known work is inspirational. I remain enthralled by the I Have a Dream speech, though I encourage you to read the whole thing and not just the part about his children and other children. I wish you could have been with me as thousands of us marched, many in tears, across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama in 2015. Even as racists guarded the grave of Edmund Pettus, who was a Confederate general, and mourned the loss of the Confederacy. This was, again, in 2015. While we were there, we were only there for a week, rocks were thrown through windows. It's clear that the struggle that was engaged on Bloody Sunday has morphed, but it continues. But I want to talk this morning about the very end of Dr. King's journey. Because in 1968, as he protested the Vietnam War and began the Poor People's Campaign, I believe Dr. King had arrived at a vision of social justice and civil rights that lifted up the oppression of the majority of working Americans of all races and creeds. His expansive vision may have cost him his life, especially his conflict with sanitation workers, and sanitation work was ruled by some pretty unsavory characters. At the end of his life, as Dr. King said, he was in the beginning stages of organizing the nationwide Poor People's Campaign. The goal was to organize workers in cities across the country to advocate for housing and income needs, and for all that organizing to culminate in the Poor People's March on Washington, D.C. Dr. King didn't make it to that march. Famously, over 1,000 sanitation workers in Memphis had gone on strike for higher wages. And speaking to them only weeks before his death, King said, quote, "With Selma and the Voting Rights Bill, one era of our struggle came to a close, and a new era came into being. Now our struggle," he said, "is for genuine equality, which means economic equality. For we know that it isn't enough to integrate lunch counters. What does it profit a man to be able to eat at an integrated lunch counter if he doesn't earn enough money to buy a hamburger and a cup of coffee?" End quote. This was a significant shift in the civil rights movement. After the victories of the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65, it seemed King and those people working with him turned their focus toward a broad economic oppression that crossed racial lines. They understood that the wealthy in the United States were taking advantage of the poor, that in fact the system was set up to benefit the wealthy, and surely affected by the horrors of Vietnam War and the deaths of so many poor young soldiers there. They began to work toward a broad coalition of the poor that centered on black Americans but didn't stop there. King himself said, quote, "We have left the realm of constitutional rights and we are entering the area of human rights," end quote. They set their course against what King called the triple evils of racism, materialism, and militarism. King wrote in another place, quote, "The Constitution assured the right to vote, but there is no such assurance of the right to adequate housing, or the right to an adequate income, or the right to high-quality education and health care. And yet, in a nation which has a gross national product at that time of $750 billion a year," King said, "it is morally right to insist that every person have a decent house, an adequate education, and enough money to provide basic needs for one's family," end quote. In that same speech, he admonished lawmakers to consider a universal basic income, an income under which no American would be allowed to fall. Guaranteed for every citizen. It is hard to watch every MLK Day as people who fight against those things claim Dr. King's name. I want us to understand that people hated Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They called him a socialist. They said he was moving too quickly, that he needed to think about what was possible. Does any of this sound familiar? In 2020, income inequality is still the vast problem that it was then. In fact, it's worse. Some say, yeah, but the market will cure it. If we just wait for the spirit of the market to move, it will one day take care of the poor, if the poor need to be taken care of. But the fundamentalist market religion is a virus that has spread all over our society. I spoke at a protest this week against a disgusting bill that would ban sex education before 7th grade and bar any discussion of homosexuality in our classrooms. They don't call it a disgusting bill, that's an editorial. It is designed to pander to ignorance and cruelty. Afterward, a supporter of that bill approached me to argue, and she just dumped out the whole market theology on me, including, in her words, not everyone has a right to health care. So she said that there was just nothing to be done if somebody was too poor to go to the doctor. Now, I wanted to make sure I understood what she was saying. So I asked her, imagine that I'm dying or my child is dying, and I don't have enough money to go to the doctor. Are you saying that I or my daughter should die? And she said, yeah. You may say that you can't extrapolate from one person's comments what an entire movement believes, and that's true. But I can look at the actions of those who are in the majority in our government these days, and what I see is exactly what Dr. King wanted to fight against. Greed and apathy. And not just a lack of concern for the common good, but a lack of understanding of the concept of the common good. I'm looking for someone to explain to me why it's radical to believe that every person deserves the worth and dignity of being able to afford housing. Why it is radical to believe that having access to health care and quality education are basic human rights. If money is the only thing standing between a person and death, and we as a society are willing to let someone die or live on the streets simply because of their income level, we don't have a political problem. We have a moral problem in this country, in this city. On Friday, I met up with a few other folks and toured the Human Services campus in Andre House. It's an amazing cluster of services available to folks who are struggling, right in the shadow of Arizona's state capitol. In this place, Phoenix residents who are experiencing homelessness can get services that range from dental work, really quality dental work, to meals, to temporary housing, to help toward permanent housing, and more. But I was stunned at how things have changed in the last couple years. There are a little over 400 beds there for folks experiencing homelessness. But surrounding the campus were hundreds more people in tents, many more than last time I was there, sleeping and living on the streets, hoping for a spot to open up. It's estimated that there are 1,000 people experiencing homelessness in the area of the Capitol and downtown who could benefit from adding more beds. Now, homelessness has been on the rise in Phoenix and Maricopa County for at least 6 years. According to the Arizona Republic, the most severe form of homelessness, unsheltered homelessness, where people are living in washes or on the streets or in other open areas. For a long time, that made up about 20% of Maricopa County's homeless population. This past year, it was up to 50%. People are suffering, and homelessness is on the increase. The problem is complicated and pernicious. Arizona has the country's second highest eviction rate, which of course contributes to the problem. as do shortages of mental health services and lack of access to the services that are available. But it's also very clear to me that there are simply not enough beds to house those experiencing homelessness. And every bed also represents key services to get people back on their feet. There's opposition to adding beds from people who don't want our homeless friends in their neighborhood. Though that seems pretty ridiculous to me because they're already there. They're just in tents or on the sidewalks or hidden away in unlit corners. But on Friday, as I walked through the tent city and chatted with a few folks, it was clear to me that this is exactly the kind of issue that we can work on today to continue Dr. King's legacy of concern for the poor. In those tents resided the rainbow of humanity, though our black and brown loved ones seemed to outnumber the white residents. These are places where work on race and social class and mental health and a livable wage intersect. One way for those of us who live in Maricopa County to carry on Dr. King's legacy is to call our elected city-level representatives, council members and mayors and the like, and ask them, what is your city doing to care for the approximately 7,000 residents of Maricopa County experiencing homelessness? If you, like me, live in the city of Phoenix, you could call your council member or the mayor's office and ask where they stand on adding much-needed beds in the city. The most effective action always begins at the local level, I think. I'll be making calls tomorrow. Friends, you know I love a good social justice rally. But probably more important is the work we do between the rallies, the work of staying awake, staying in touch with people whom we've elected, staying in touch with the needs of our fellow citizens, the people in our cities, making sure we're letting people in power know what we think. You are amazing at this. You inspire me. And we have to keep at it. There's another big opportunity coming, and it crosses lines of race and social class and gender too. You may know that last week we announced a new ballot initiative to get over $900 million a year back in Arizona public schools. Do that by raising taxes on single earners who earn more than $250,000 or joint filers who earn more than $500,000 a year. We learned from the beating we took in the court last time. And so a crack legal team has prepared this new initiative, and it's being vetted now by the bipartisan Arizona Legal Council. In a month, we'll be ready to pound the pavement again, gathering the needed 237,645 valid signatures to get it on the ballot. Last time around, of all the congregations that are active in Valley Interfaith Project, VUU gathered the most signatures for the ballot initiative. Are you ready to do it again? Shortly after the press conference, announcing that new education initiative, another local resident approached me wondering why in the world we need it. After all, they said, when their child wasn't receiving a quality public education, they simply applied for a scholarship for their child to attend a ritzy private Christian school, then made sure they could drive their kid the hour one way every day. They said to me, why would any parent want their kids to stay in these hood schools? No understanding of their own privilege, no concern for poor families or for the common good, for the fact that educating our children, all of our children, is essential to our democracy. This is the market mentality that we're up against. Nobody said it was going to be easy. These days, the political landscape is pretty depressing. Still, we can't allow ourselves to despair because for most of us who may not be as deeply affected by some of these policies, despair is a position of privilege. As Dr. King wrote, the line of progress is never straight. For a period, a movement may follow a straight line and then it encounters obstacles and the path bends. It's like, he said, it's like curving around a mountain when you're approaching a city. Often it feels as though you're moving backwards and you lose sight of your goal. But in fact, you're moving ahead and soon you see the city again and it's closer than the last time. The fight is far from over, he said, because it is neither won, as some suggest, nor lost, as the calamity-ridden declare. I love that line. The fight is far from over, because it is neither won, as some assert, nor lost, as the calamity-ridden declare. I want to end this morning with a quick charge to the white people in the room, especially those of us who long for peace. In King's own words, quote, social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. There is no other answer. Constructive social change will bring certain tranquility. Evasions will merely encourage turmoil. Negroes, he said, hold only one key to the double lock of peaceful change. The other is in the hands of the white community. So if you despair of the division in our country, I think the thing to do is for us to get to work taking care of each other, including those who are often left out of conversations about the common good and who is to benefit. Who are we to despair when there is so much to be done? Hope and determination are the only positions that make sense and keep us true to the path of justice. We're about to sing of the hope that King urged us toward. The song We Shall Overcome was written in 1900 by Reverend Charles Albert Tenley. Versions of it have been sung by striking tobacco workers in North Carolina, sung in Spanish by striking grape workers, and used repeatedly and often in the civil rights movement. It was sung at Dr. King's funeral, a way of voicing fierce and resistant hope in the midst of the valley of the shadow. We shall overcome in the moments after Dr. King died. So we sing it today, we sing it in that spirit, determined to make it true, not in some theoretical sense, but to make its promise true in Gilbert and in Mesa and in Chandler and Phoenix and Arizona and these United States, now in so much turmoil, and one blessed day the world over, to make it true. We shall overcome. Until then, may we be faithful to keep our voices lifted and our shoulders to the ever-turning wheel. May we make it so. Amen.